So, hello everyone. The topic on which I'm going to speak upon is IPv4 addressing, uh, public and private. So, I'll just briefly go through in general what is an IP address. So, it is a numeric tag or an ID which is given to every device or internet router so as to establish communication between different devices. It's public and private of two general types. We'll come to it ahead. Coming to IPv4 specific, it is a 32-bit dotted decimal notation type of IP address given to every device, wherein every number ranges from 0 to 255, as I've stated over here. So that was the general description. And so uh, coming to private and public IP addresses in general. So private IP address is given by the router, a local router to which your device is connected to. So let's say we all have internet routers, Wi-Fi routers in our home. And so all the devices which are connected to that Wi-Fi router will be assigned a private IP address by the router itself. So let's say two devices are connected to my Wi-Fi router, and I want to send a mail. Uh, Not a useful situation, but I want to send a mail from one device to another of the same network, same router. So this private IP address will be used. And coming to public IP address, it is given by a internet service provider. So let's say my internet service provider is Geo over here, and I want to communicate with a device which is in Boston, USA. So over there, that device will be having a different internet service provider, and so my service provider Geo will assign me a public IP address, and over there that device will be assigned a different IP address, a public IP address by the respective internet service provider. So this way, two different devices with two different public IP addresses will be able to communicate. So I'll be able to send mails, and for that purpose, for this in general, this global network in that scenario will be using these two different IP addresses. So if you see here in this diagram, I've shown how there is a router in between, and devices connected to that router have a private IP address of their own. So router over here is bridging the gap between the public IP address, public network globally, and the private network that it has established with its neighboring devices. So plus point of having public IP address is that you may or may not have a router in between. You can directly communicate with two different devices. Wherein for private IP address, that's not the scene. You have to have some kind of node in between, intersection in between, like two devices. If they have to communicate, there has to be a router or that sort of device in between to assign IP addresses. But public is not that case, and so for that reason, uh, a different advantage for the private IP address is that it is more safe as compared to the public IP address, because the IP addresses that are assigned by the router, they are not we can say directly traceable over the internet. But coming to public IP addresses, they are traceable through internet. So uh, an internet service provider over there can trace my IP address and my location. So these kind of things are causing security concerns. So all the cyber threats and banking transaction issues that we hear nowadays are because of this low uh, security, or we can say a kind of disadvantage of public IP address. And coming to IPv4 in specific, uh, the it's actually depreciating for public IP addresses. So there aren't really many public IP addresses, IPv4 notations assignments in many cases. But in private network, yes, there are IPv4 addresses. And so uh, again, public IP addresses are of two types I've mentioned in this slide: dynamic and static. So dynamic is one that is both are assigned by the internet service provider. Dynamic is the one that changes occasionally. So if any kind of network issue arises, they reassign according to certain timeline. But static IP address is a fixed one that does not change with certain time interval or any such situation. And so, yeah, that was about IPv4 public and private addresses addressing concept in general. So yeah, as over here we can see how the NAT router is bridging the gap between private and public network. There was a diagram in previous slides as well. So private network will assign an IP address to my router, and my router will be establishing a private network within its locality. So over here, let's say over here, I'll be having a router which will be having a private network over here with a couple of my phones and a couple of my laptops. And these devices will be having a private IP address, but there will be a public IP address communication between the router and the internet service provider and the global networking. So yeah, these were the key differences. So uh, coming to IPv4 in general, private IP addresses are more safer and suggested as compared to public IP networks, IP addresses, and reason being that it is not widely used. So uh, employing private networks save costs for, let's say, it's actually used by organizations for their internal usage and operations. So that is useful for cost cutting. But using public networks for such organizations, it uh, brings on additional costs in future. So buying the network services and IP addresses, that comes on with certain prices day by day. And so yeah, these were the examples that I explained for home network or corporate networks. And so in general, there are two types of IP addresses, public and private, and three key resources which are used to these legally manage the public and private addresses. So thank you.